Deadlock is finally here in Valorant, and in this video, I'll be going over some of the weird interactions, specifically to do with her Barrier Mesh ability. Firstly though, let's take a look at some of the stats. The Barrier Mesh will last for a total of 30 seconds if it doesn't get broken, and the first 2 to 3 seconds it will spend fortifying, similar to a Sage Wall. In this clip, you can see and hear the cues to let you know once the barrier is done fortifying, and it's at full HP.
Barrier deployed.
Speaking of full HP, breaking the center of this barrier will take a total of 31 phantom bullets, since it has a total of 1200 HP. Alternatively, you can break the smaller orbs which only have 700 health, but that will only drop one portion of the barrier. One of the most interesting interactions is actually with Astra's pull, because as you can see here, the barrier mesh prevents you from getting pulled towards the center. This means you can actually place this ability down, which will then stop you from getting pulled off the spike if you're trying to defuse. Now, as a general rule, it seems like abilities that you can throw will all go through the barrier mesh, whereas abilities that you deploy, things like a drone or a dog, those won't go through. So here's how that looks with some specific agents. Razor's Broombot won't be able to go through the barrier mesh. Even if it sees an enemy, it simply bounces off and goes in the other direction. On the other hand, her satchels and grenades will go through. Both of these abilities will also damage the barrier mesh, but not by a massive amount. Then when it comes to Razor's ultimate, you can fire it straight through the barrier, or if you aim it at the ground, it will actually just one-shot the barrier. Breach's utility won't actually latch onto the barrier mesh, instead it'll just go through and start targeting the next wall behind that. I even tried boosting over with this ultimate, but I don't think it quite gets you high enough. There's nothing too special going on with Brimstone. He can of course fire his molly through, and if you put a stim beacon on the other side, the effect will still reach you through the barrier. One noteworthy interaction with Chamber is that he can just put his TP straight through and teleport to the other side. Cypher again, nothing too crazy, all of his utility you can put through the barrier. When we get to Fade though, things start getting interesting. Her Horn and Sears obviously can just be thrown straight through, but her Prowler gets blocked, unless it latches onto an enemy. If that happens and the Prowler doesn't get shot, it'll actually just break through the barrier and keep chasing them down. The interactions with Gecko are quite similar. His Mosh and Dizzy can be thrown straight through like normal, but Thrash actually gets blocked entirely and there's no way for it to get through. Then Wingman is similar to the Prowler, where if it latches onto an enemy, it'll stay targeted on them and bust through the wall. Also, when trying to plant the spike with Gecko, it gets a little weird. If the barrier is already placed down, you won't be able to send Wingman through it, but if you send him off before the disc lands, he will do the same thing as before, eventually breaking through the barrier and continuing on to plant the spike. Next is Jet. Her abilities work as you'd expect. Her smokes go straight through, and her dash gets blocked. She's another one of the agents that can actually get past the wall though using her updraft, and of course the knives will go through the wall as well. KO's knife has no way of interrupting the barrier mesh, so as long as that disc is in the air, there is nothing either KO's knife or his ultimate will be able to do to stop it. Now I can't tell if this is a bug or not, but it seems like Killjoy's mollies don't do damage to the barrier mesh. Other than that though, her turret will be able to shoot through the barrier, and her alarm bot can actually sort of chase people through and make them vulnerable. Neon is a very simple one. Obviously you aren't able to slide through, but all of her other utility can be shot through. Omen has a really interesting interaction with barrier mesh. As you'd expect, he is able to TP through, however the tricky part is when you go to use his ultimate to pick up the spike, because if the enemy Deadlock places the barrier mesh on top of it, it actually entirely stops you from picking it up as if there was a stack of people standing on it. With Phoenix, there's nothing too much to say, although once again I noticed that it seems like his mollies do not deal damage to the barrier mesh. Reyna is one of the exciting ones because you're actually able to go straight through the barrier mesh with your dismiss. It doesn't matter whether you're in your ultimate or not, all you have to do is get a kill and you can just dismiss straight through. With Sage, it is possible to wall over the barrier mesh, however you have to make sure that you jump because the mesh is just slightly taller, and if you don't you'll end up getting stuck. Skye is another interesting one. Her Trailblazer is similar to Razor's Broombot, where it just simply can't go through whatsoever, whereas her Seekers on the other hand are more like Fate's Prowlers, where if it catches onto an enemy, it'll just bust through the wall and continue chasing them. The only thing noteworthy with Sova is that his drone is technically blocked, but you can just fly it up and over, and it will also be able to tag people through the barrier. Like I showed earlier with Viper, all of her abilities go through, even her ultimate the gas will spread through the barrier. Yoru has quite a few different interactions with barrier mesh. Firstly, his flash can obviously just go straight through, but then both his clone and TP actually get blocked. The clone makes sense, but I was honestly a little bit surprised by the TP. On the other hand though, if you use his ultimate, it's similar to a Reyna dismiss, and you can just walk straight through. Finally we come to Deadlock, and the interesting thing here is that her barrier does absolutely nothing to stop the cocoon. It doesn't matter whether it's an ally barrier or an enemy barrier, either way the cocoon just goes straight through, and yeah, this one really surprised me. So those are all the interactions that I found with Deadlock's barrier mesh. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, because I have a lot more videos planned with Deadlock over the next few days.